My name is Karen Good, a major in the United States Army. I have spent my entire adult life serving my country, and the last 5 years serving my husband's family, believing that loyalty would eventually be returned. But at a 3-star Michelin restaurant in the heart of Napa Valley, during a lavish 70th birthday party for my mother-in-law that I paid for, I realized I was wrong. 13 members of the Caldwell family stood there, raising glasses of $5,000 Cabernet, snickering as they pointed to the long banquet table, which had only 12 chairs. My husband, Sean, didn't defend me. He just smirked, adjusted his silk bow tie, and said, "Oops, must be a miscount. You know, Karen, you really are better suited for a mess hall than a place this refined." They thought I would cry and run away in shame. They were wrong. I didn't leave to hide. I left to activate Code Broken Arrow, a total financial destruction of their livelihood within 30 minutes. Before I tell you how satisfying it felt to watch their credit cards get declined in front of the elite, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you believe betrayal should always be paid back with justice. The air in Yountville always smells the same. A mix of wild lavender, damp earth, and old money. It was a crisp evening at the French Laundry. If you know Napa, you know this isn't just a restaurant. It's a temple. The stone facade was glowing under the warm amber lights, and the gravel crunched softly under the soles of my navy blue heels. I paused for a second at the entrance, smoothing down the skirt of my dress. It was a structured, modest piece, efficient, elegant, but not flashy. Just like me. I checked my watch. 1900 hours, right on time. My internal logistics clock was ticking. I had spent the last 3 months organizing this operation. Not a military maneuver, but something far more volatile. Eleanor Caldwell's 70th birthday. The private dining room, the tasting menu, the flower arrangements imported from Holland. I had coordinated every single detail. I had signed the checks. I had ensured the optics were perfect for the Caldwell family image. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the private courtyard. Laughter floated in the air, the kind of polite, tinkling laughter that sounds like ice hitting crystal. The entire Caldwell clan was there, 13 of them. They were clustered around the outdoor fire pit, bathed in the soft glow of the evening. They looked like a page out of a town and country magazine spread, linen suits, silk wraps, and teeth whitened to an aggressive shade of porcelain. Eleanor stood in the center, holding court. She was wearing a silver Chanel gown that cost more than my first car. In her hand, she swirled a glass of red wine. I recognized the label immediately. Screaming Eagle Cabernet. $6,000 a bottle. I had ordered 3 of them, per her request. I walked toward them, shoulders back, chin up. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," I said, my voice projecting clearly. The conversation died instantly. It was like someone had cut the power. Eleanor turned slowly. Her eyes, pale and watery blue, scanned me from my sensible heels to my pulled-back hair. She didn't smile. She just took a slow sip of that expensive wine, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Thank you for the logistics, Karen," she said, emphasizing the word logistics like it was a dirty word, something manual and blue-collar. "You always were good at organizing the help. But tonight is for family, real family." My stomach tightened. I looked at Sean, my husband, the man I had vowed to protect. He was standing next to his mother, sipping a bourbon. He didn't step forward to greet me. He didn't kiss my cheek. He looked down at his Italian loafers, swirling the ice in his glass. "We're about to sit down," Eleanor said breezily, gesturing toward the long, beautifully set table under the trellis. "Shall we?" The group moved toward the table. I followed, maintaining formation. I approached the table, and my eyes instinctively did a sweep. It's a habit from 20 years in the logistics corps. Count the assets. Verify the inventory. 1, 2, 3. I stopped at the end of the table. There were 13 people in our party. There were 12 chairs. I blinked, thinking perhaps the staff made an error. The French Laundry doesn't make errors. I looked at the place cards. Every name was there in beautiful calligraphy. Eleanor, Sean, Vanessa. Uncle Robert, Cousin Claire. There was no card for Karen. The silence around the table was heavy, expectant. They were all standing behind their chairs, waiting, watching me. "Sean," I said, my voice low. "There's a chair missing." Sean looked up. For a split second, I saw panic in his eyes, the look of a man caught between a rock and his mother. But then he looked at Eleanor. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Sean's spine straightened. He let out a short, nervous chuckle and adjusted his silk bow tie. "Oops," he said, loud enough for the waiters to hear. "I guess we miscounted. Simple math error, right, darling? I mean, you're the logistics expert." The cousins giggled. "Sean," I repeated, staring at him. "Where am I sitting?" He smirked, gaining confidence from the audience. "Well, honestly, Karen, look at this place." He gestured to the pristine white tablecloths and the delicate crystal stemware. "It's a bit elevated, don't you think? You know, you've always said you're more comfortable with simple things. You'd probably be happier grabbing a burger at the bar down the street. You're more suited for a mess hall than a Michelin star." It felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. The heat rushed to my face. This wasn't a mistake. This was an ambush. I looked at them. 13 people enjoying the wine I paid for, standing at the table I reserved, preparing to eat the meal I ordered. And I was the punchline, the outsider, the staff with a rank. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and send that $6,000 wine crashing onto the limestone patio. I wanted to cry and ask my husband why he hated me this much. But then the training took over. Situation report, hostile environment, assets compromised, unit cohesion, 0. In the Army, when you walk into a trap, you don't panic. You assess and you extract. Crying is for civilians. Anger is a waste of energy. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lavender and betrayal. I looked Sean dead in the eye. He couldn't hold my gaze. He flickered back to his mother again. "Roger that," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Message received. Target is not part of this unit." Sean blinked, confused by the lack of tears. "Karen, don't make a scene. Just go back to the hotel." "Enjoy the dinner, Sean. Happy birthday, Eleanor." I didn't wait for a response. I performed an about face, a movement ingrained in my muscle memory, and walked away. I kept my back straight. I heard the murmur of relief behind me, the sound of chairs scraping as they finally sat down, thinking they had won, thinking the help had been dismissed. I walked out of the restaurant, past the maitre d', who looked at me with concern. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool Napa night. The wind bit at my bare arms, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire burning in my chest, a cold blue flame of absolute clarity. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact list. They thought this was over. They thought they had humiliated me into submission. I dialed a number I'd saved for emergencies. "General Patton was right," I whispered to the empty parking lot. "No one ever defended anything successfully. There's only attack and attack and attack some more." It was time to go on the offensive. The wind in the parking lot of the French Laundry bit through my dress, raising goosebumps on my arms. But the chill I felt wasn't from the Napa Valley air. It was a familiar cold, a ghostly temperature that I had lived with for 5 years. It reminded me of the ocean breeze at Martha's Vineyard. That was where the crack in the foundation first appeared, though I was too blinded by love, or maybe just the desperate need to belong, to see it. My mind drifted back 3 summers ago. The Caldwell family estate on the vineyard. It was the 4th of July weekend. The house was a sprawling, shingled beauty overlooking the water, the kind of place that screams, old American money. I remembered standing in the kitchen. It was 90 degrees, and the air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the heat of the industrial ovens. I wasn't wearing a swimsuit or holding a cocktail. I was wearing an apron stained with clam juice and butter. Sean, Eleanor, and his father had spent the entire day at Farm Neck Golf Club. Networking, Sean had called it. Essential family business. I had stayed behind. Why? Because Eleanor had casually mentioned that the caterers canceled last minute and looked at me with those watery, expectant eyes. Karen, dear, you're so good with operations. Could you handle dinner? Just a simple New England clam bake for 30 of our closest friends. 30 people. A simple clam bake. So, while they were out working on their backswings and laughing in the Atlantic breeze, I was hauling 50 pounds of corn, potatoes, and live lobsters from the market. I was scrubbing clams until my knuckles were raw. I was sweating through my shirt, managing the boil times, setting up the long trestle tables on the lawn, and ensuring the wine was chilled to exactly 55 degrees. I remembered the moment they came home. I heard the crunch of the Range Rover on the gravel driveway. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, hoping for a thank you, or maybe a wow, Karen, you saved the day. Sean walked into the kitchen, smelling like sea salt and expensive cologne. He didn't look at the pots on the stove. He didn't look at my red, heat-flushed face. He looked right through me to the refrigerator. God, I'm parched, he said, grabbing a beer. He took a long swig and leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. We played a terrible round. The wind on the back nine was brutal. Is the chowder ready? Mom's hungry. He didn't ask if I was tired. He didn't offer to carry the heavy pot outside. He just assumed the food would appear, like magic. Like I was a utility, like running water or electricity. It's ready, Sean, I said, my voice tight. Great, he said, walking out the door without looking back. Bring out some G&Ts first, will you? That night, as I served the food, pouring wine into empty glasses while they laughed about inside jokes I didn't understand, I caught Eleanor watching me. She wasn't looking at me with gratitude. She was looking at me with approval. But not the kind you give a daughter-in-law. It was the kind of approval you give a sturdy appliance that's working correctly. It took me back to the very beginning. My wedding day. I was in my white dress, trying to manage a crisis. The wedding planner had mixed up the seating chart for the reception. The mother of the groom's friends were seated next to the band, and they were furious. The planner was hyperventilating in the bathroom. So, I did what I do. I took command. I hitched up my wedding gown, grabbed a clipboard, and reorganized the entire floor plan in 10 minutes. I was directing staff, moving tables, and solving problems. I remembered walking past a decorative hedge and hearing Eleanor's voice. She was talking to her sister, thinking she was out of earshot. Well, Eleanor chuckled, the sound like dry leaves scraping together. At least she has her uses. Look at her move those tables. She orders people around just like a drill sergeant. It's terribly unrefined, of course, but at least she saves us the cost of a coordinator. She's basically high-functioning help with a rank. High-functioning help. I had frozen in my wedding shoes. But then Sean had appeared, smiling that charming, boyish smile that used to make my knees weak. He took my hand and kissed it. Ignore them, he had whispered. You're amazing, Karen. You're so strong. That's why I love you. You don't need me to coddle you like those other debutante girls. You can handle anything. You're so strong. That was the trap. That was the phrase that locked the cage door. For 5 years, "You're so strong" was Sean's excuse for everything. He didn't need to defend me when his mother mocked my southern accent because I was strong. He didn't need to get a steady job or manage his own finances because I was capable. He didn't need to help with the housework, or the bills, or the emotional labor of our marriage because I was a major in the U.S. Army. I didn't need protecting. I was the protector. I realized, standing there in the Napa darkness, that I hadn't been a wife. I had been a logistics officer for the Caldwell family drama. I had been a free maid. And worst of all, I had been their bank. I thought about the mortgage papers I co-signed because Sean's credit score was in the ruins. I thought about the investments I funded for his failed startups. I thought about the thousands of dollars, my hard-earned Army pay, that went into keeping up their appearance of wealth. I had given them my sweat, my dignity, and my savings. And in return, they gave me a missing chair at a dinner table. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from rage, the kind of rage that burns slow and hot. I know I'm not the only one who has felt this. If you have ever been the strong one in the family who gets used, unrecognized, and left to clean up the mess while everyone else has fun, please hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you did for your family that went completely unappreciated? Type, "I'm done," if you are tired of being taken for granted. The memories faded as the reality of the Napa night rushed back in. The silence of the parking lot was deafening. "You're right, Sean," I whispered to the empty air. "I am strong." But he had forgotten the other side of strength. Strength isn't just about enduring pain. Strength is about having the power to strike back. I unlocked my phone. The screen glowed bright in the darkness. I wasn't just checking emails, I was hunting. They called me logistics. Fine. They were about to see what happens when logistics goes to war. Because before we left for this trip, I had installed a little safeguard, a digital tripwire. And I had a feeling that while I was cooking lobsters and fixing seating charts all those years, Sean had been busy doing something else entirely. I tapped the icon for our cloud-shared messages. It was time to find the smoking gun. I stood in the dark parking lot of the French Laundry, the gravel crunching beneath my feet as I shifted my weight. The cold wind bit at my exposed shoulders, but my hands were steady as I held my phone. I wasn't checking social media. I was looking at a hidden folder in my photo gallery simply labeled tax documents. Inside that folder weren't tax returns. They were screenshots. They were the ammunition I'd gathered exactly 7 days ago. It took me back to last Tuesday morning in our master bedroom in Virginia. A Tuesday that started like any other. Coffee brewing, the morning news playing softly in the background, the illusion of a happy marriage still intact. Sean was in the shower. I could hear the water running and his terrible humming of some classic rock song. He was in high spirits, whistling and strutting around because the big Napa trip was approaching. He told me he had an early meeting with investors for his new defense consulting firm, a firm that, on paper, had never turned a profit. His Apple Watch was sitting on the marble vanity next to his sink, charging. I was brushing my teeth, my mind occupied with the packing list for the trip. Did I pack Eleanor's favorite shawl? Did I confirm the limo service? I was in full logistics mode, serving the family. Then, the watch buzzed. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration against the stone counter. Bzzzt. I usually respect privacy. In the Army, OPSEC, operational security, is a religion. You don't snoop without cause. But for months, I had felt a shift in the wind. Sean had been guarding his phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. He changed his passcode. He took calls in the garage. I glanced at the watch face. The message was from a contact saved simply as V. The text preview lit up the small OLED screen. It didn't disappear immediately. It sat there, glowing in the dim bathroom light, burning itself into my retinas. Is the Napa dinner going to be the end of that soldier BT? Our son needs a legitimate father, Sean. I'm tired of waiting. I froze. My toothbrush hovered mid-air. Soldier BT, our son, legitimate father. The water in the shower turned off. The glass door creaked open. "Honey," Sean called out, grabbing a towel. "Have you seen my gray suit? The one with the pinstripes?" My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My vision tunneled. But 20 years of military discipline kicked in. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the watch at his head. I didn't collapse. "It's at the dry cleaners, Sean," I called back. My voice was steady, eerie. "Wear the navy one. It looks more professional." "Right. Good call," he shouted back, oblivious. He dressed quickly, gave me a distracted peck on the cheek. He smelled of sandalwood and deception, and left the house. "Don't wait up, babe. Late strategy session." The moment the front door clicked shut, I dropped the act. I walked into his home office. I didn't need his password. I didn't need to hack anything. I am the wife. I am the one who handles the bills, the taxes, the insurance. I am the logistics officer. He thought he was clever by changing his phone code, but he was lazy with the things that actually mattered. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint Chase private client account. I expected to see charges for hotels or dinners, standard cheating behavior. But what I saw made the blood drain from my face. The checking account, which should have had $50,000 in it, money I'd saved from my deployment bonuses, was down to $3,000. I logged into Fidelity. This was the holy grail. Our retirement accounts, my 401k, which I had rolled over and added to his, building a nest egg for our future. We had over $400,000 in there. It was supposed to be for our beach house in retirement. It was supposed to be our safety net. Balance, 12.45. I stared at the screen, blinking, thinking it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. Balance, $12.45. I clicked on Transaction History. 2 weeks ago, there was a massive liquidation, an early withdrawal. My hands shook as I scrolled through the details. He hadn't just taken the money, he had done it in the stupidest way possible. By pulling cash out early, he had triggered a 10% IRS penalty plus income tax. He had essentially set fire to nearly $100,000 just to get his hands on the liquid cash immediately. And where did the money go? I tracked the wire transfer. It went from Fidelity to Chase, and then a single debit card transaction cleared 3 days ago. Tiffany and Sihiri Zero. Tyson's Corner Galleria, $48,500. $48,000. I looked down at my own left hand. My wedding band was a simple gold band with a modest diamond, something we bought when we were young. I loved it because I thought it represented us. He had drained our entire life savings, my combat pay, my hazard duty bonuses, the money I bled for, to buy a ring for V. I didn't have to be a detective to know who V was. Vanessa Hughes. I had seen her at the club. Tall, blonde, from a family that owned half of Richmond. She was a debutante who never worked a day in her life. And apparently, she was pregnant. Our son needs a legitimate father. The puzzle pieces slammed together. Eleanor knew. That's why she was so cold lately. She wanted an heir. She wanted a legitimate grandson from a blue-blooded mother, not a child from a career soldier who grew up in a middle-class suburb. They were using my money to pay for the ring. They were using my money to pay for the Napa trip. And at that dinner, once the optics of the birthday were secured, Sean was going to leave me. He was going to discard me in the middle of wine country, bankrupt and broken, while he started his new life with Vanessa and their heir. I sat back in the leather chair. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating. I should have been crying. A normal wife would be hysterical. A normal wife would be throwing vases against the wall. But I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was an officer assessing a battlefield. Intel confirmed. Enemy combatants identified. Resources compromised. Tears are for people who have hope. I had no hope left. I had something better. I had the element of surprise. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Click. The text message on the watch, I had snapped it before he came out of the shower. Click. The zero balance on Fidelity. Click. The Tiffany receipt. Click. The text messages between Eleanor and Sean that I found on his iPad discussing the announcement and how to handle Karen. I saved everything to a secure cloud drive. Then I sent copies to my personal encrypted email. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I looked tired. I looked like a woman who had given too much. But in my eyes, I saw the reflection of a soldier who had just been given a new mission. "You want a war, Sean?" I whispered to the empty house. "You want to treat me like an enemy?" I smoothed down my shirt. "Fine, I'll show you what a scorched earth campaign looks like." Back in the Napa parking lot, I closed the folder on my phone. The evidence was safe. The trap was set. Inside the restaurant, they were probably toasting to their cleverness right now. They thought I was gone. They thought I was crying in a hotel room, defeated. I swiped to my contacts and found the number for Mike, the manager of the French Laundry. We had spoken 3 times on the phone coordinating the menu. We had bonded over our service records. He was former Marine Corps. I wasn't just going to ruin their dinner, I was going to ruin their credit scores, their reputation, and their night. I pressed the call button. Broken arrow, I said to myself. Execute. In the military, we have a saying that separates the rookies from the veterans. Amateurs talk strategy. Professionals talk logistics. Napoleon might have known how to move an army, but if his soldiers didn't have boots or bread, the war was lost before the first shot was fired. Sean and his mother thought they were playing a high-level strategy game. They were plotting the announcement, the divorce, the heir, the new life. But they had forgotten who bought the bread. They had forgotten who paid for the boots. For the next 48 hours, I didn't sleep. I operated in a state of cold, hyper-focused clarity. I turned our guest bedroom in Virginia into my command post. My first move was defensive. I needed to secure the perimeter. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, USAA. For those who haven't served, USAA isn't just a bank, it's a fortress. When you call them, you aren't talking to a random call center employee. You're talking to people who understand what it means to serve. "This is Major Karen Good," I said, my voice low. "Authentication code Alpha Zulu 9. "Good morning, Major," the representative replied. "How can we help you today?" "I need to open a new checking account, individual, sole ownership, and I need to redirect my direct deposit immediately." I moved every cent that legally belonged to me. My deployment savings from Afghanistan, my disability checks from a knee injury in training, my current salary. I transferred it all out of the joint Chase account and into the new ironclad vault at USAA. I left exactly enough in the joint account to cover the electric bill and the mortgage for 2 weeks. Just enough so the alarms wouldn't go off before we got to California. Sean wouldn't notice. He never checked the balance unless his debit card was declined, and right now, he was too busy fantasizing about spending his stolen retirement money on Vanessa. Step 1 complete. Asset protection. Step 2 was offensive. It was time to lay the minefield. I pulled out the itinerary for the Napa trip. It was an obscene display of wealth, limousines, private wine tastings, spa treatments, and the crown jewel. The 3-night stay at Auberge du Soleil, one of the most exclusive resorts in the valley. I called the resort's concierge. "This is Karen Good," I said, projecting the warm, efficient tone of a dutiful wife. "I'm calling to confirm the reservations for the Caldwell party." "Of course, Mrs. Good. We have you in the private maison, arriving Friday." "Excellent. I need to update the payment information on file." This was the critical moment. "Go ahead," the concierge said. "I want to keep the reservation under my name," I explained. "I'll be the primary point of contact. However, for the final billing and any incidentals, the room service, the spa, the vintage wines, I need you to authorize a secondary card." I pulled a sleek silver card from my wallet. It wasn't mine. It was the Caldwell Construction corporate credit card. Sean had given me an authorized user card years ago for emergencies, but he had forgotten about it. I knew the company was bleeding money. I knew they were leveraged to the hilt. But the card was still active, teetering on the edge of its limit. "Please keep my personal Amex on file just for the initial hold," I said, "but set the corporate card as the primary payment method for the checkout. We're writing it off as a business expense." "Understood, Mrs. Good. It's all set." I hung up. The trap was armed. If I played my cards right, when the bill came due, all $50,000 of it, it wouldn't hit my personal account. And if I timed it perfectly, when I removed my authorization, the entire weight of that debt would crash down on a corporate card that I knew would decline. It was silent in the house, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee. Black, no sugar. I needed the bitterness to keep me sharp. On the granite island, sitting next to the fruit bowl, was my grandmother's old leather-bound Bible. It was worn at the edges, the pages thin as onion skin. I wasn't a woman who prayed for revenge. I didn't believe in vengeance. Vengeance is messy. I believed in physics. For every action, there is a reaction. I opened the book. It fell open naturally to Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. The words were underlined in faded red ink. "Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." I ran my finger over the verse. Reaping what you sow. It wasn't about me punishing them. It was about me stepping out of the way and letting the consequences find them. They had sown deceit. They had sown greed. They were about to harvest a bumper crop of humiliation. The front door opened. "Honey, I'm home!" Sean's voice boomed through the hallway. He sounded disgustingly cheerful. He walked into the kitchen, carrying his golf clubs, a smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his eyes. He was wearing that gray suit, the one I had told him was at the cleaners, just to test him. He looked like the picture of a successful defense contractor, not a man who had just stolen his wife's retirement. "Hey," he said, dropping the keys on the counter. He walked over and kissed me on the forehead. It felt like a brand. "You packing? The flight is tomorrow." I took a sip of my coffee, looking at him over the rim of the mug. I didn't flinch. "I'm almost done," I said. "Just finalizing the logistics." Sean grabbed an apple from the bowl, tossing it in the air. I was thinking, this trip is going to be good for us. I know Mom can be a handful, and I know I've been busy with work lately. He made air quotes, and I almost laughed at the audacity. But I really want to use this weekend to reconnect. Just you and me, rekindle the romance, right? He flashed that boyish grin, the one that used to melt my heart. Now, it just looked like a predator showing its teeth. He was lying so easily. He was planning to serve me divorce papers over dessert, yet here he was, talking about romance. I set my mug down slowly. I smoothed the collar of his shirt, my hands brushing against his neck. I could feel his pulse. It was steady. He had no conscience. "You're right, Sean," I said, allowing a small cryptic smile to touch my lips. "I think this trip is going to be unforgettable. We're going to clear the air. Everything is going to be laid out on the table." He relaxed, thinking I had bought the lie. "That's my girl, always the team player." "Oh, absolutely," I replied, turning back to the sink so he wouldn't see the cold light in my eyes. "I promise you, Sean, after this weekend, you will never look at me the same way again." "Great," he said, taking a bite of the apple. "I can't wait." "Neither can I whispered to the suds in the sink. "Neither can I." I looked at the calendar on the wall. 24 hours until wheels up. The battlefield was prepped. The mines were laid. Now, all I had to do was get them into the kill zone. The drive from San Francisco to Napa Valley usually takes about 90 minutes. It's supposed to be a scenic transition, leaving the gray fog of the city, crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, and entering the golden, sun-drenched rolling hills of wine country. It's supposed to be a journey of decompression. For me, it was a 90-minute deployment into a hostile zone, trapped in a pressurized metal tube. We were in a stretch Hummer limousine, Eleanor's request, of course. She claimed she needed the legroom, but I knew she just wanted the optics. She wanted everyone on Highway 29 to know the Caldwells had arrived. Inside, the air was thick enough to choke a horse. It smelled of stale recycled air, expensive champagne, and an overpowering amount of Chanel No. 5. There were 8 of us in the main cabin. Sean and I were seated on the backward-facing bench, looking at Eleanor, his Aunt Margaret, and 2 cousins. This meant I had to ride the entire way, making direct eye contact with the architects of my misery. Sean sat next to me, but he might as well have been on the moon. He had pulled his hat down low and feigned sleep the moment we crossed the Sausalito border. It was his classic defensive maneuver: play dead and let his wife take the fire. I sat with my spine rigid, hands folded in my lap, practicing deep, tactical breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. "It really is the only option, Eleanor," Aunt Margaret said, her voice piercing through the hum of the engine. She was swirling a glass of sparkling rosé, careful not to spill it on her cream linen pants. "I agree." Eleanor nodded, looking thoughtfully out the window at the passing vineyards. "Phillips Exeter is the family tradition. Sean went there. His father went there. It builds character." I stiffened. They were talking about boarding schools. "But Andover has that new athletic facility," Margaret countered. "And considering the mother's background, she was an equestrian champion in Richmond, wasn't she? The athletic genes will be undeniable. A little polo player, perhaps?" My stomach turned over. They weren't talking about a cousin's kid. They weren't talking about anyone currently in the car. They were discussing the educational future of Sean's unborn child with Vanessa. and they were doing it right in front of me. They didn't even lower their voices. They spoke with the casual arrogance of people who believe the help is too stupid to understand the nuances of their conversation. They assumed that because I was from a middle-class military family, I wouldn't catch the references to legacy admissions or equestrian genes. We need to make sure the trust fund is set up before the birth, Eleanor said, taking a sip of wine. We can't have the finances being muddy. We need a clear line of succession, especially if there are other complications. Her eyes flicked briefly to me, then back to Margaret. A microscopic glance, but it hit its target. I was the complication. I was the muddy finance. I looked at Sean. His eyes were squeezed shut, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. He heard every word. He knew they were planning the life of his illegitimate son while his wife sat 6 inches away. And he did nothing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter the glass partition and tell the driver to pull over. I wanted to tell them that the trust fund they were planning to set up was currently sitting in my USAA account, not theirs. But I didn't. Hold the line, Karen, I told myself. Do not engage. Let them dig the hole deeper. Karen, dear, Eleanor said suddenly, as if just remembering I existed. You're awfully quiet. You're not getting carsick, are you? I know these luxury vehicles can be a bit much for people who aren't used to them. I offered a tight, polite smile. I'm fine, Eleanor, just admiring the logistics of the harvest. She smirked and turned back to Margaret. So quaint. When the limo finally crunched onto the gravel driveway of Auberge du Soleil, I felt physically exhausted, as if I had just run a 10-mile ruck march with a full pack. The resort was stunning. Terracotta roofs, olive trees, and a view of the valley that looked like a painting. Bellhops rushed out to open the doors. We walked into the lobby, a cool sanctuary of stone and art. The concierge, a young man with a bright smile, greeted us. Welcome, the Caldwell party. We have the main maison ready for you, Mrs. Caldwell, he said to Eleanor. 3 bedrooms, private pool, valley view. Eleanor beamed. Perfect. And, the concierge continued, looking at his screen, we have the additional suites for the rest of the family. And for... He paused, looking at me, then at the list. For Mrs. Karen Good? Yes, I stepped forward. That's me. We have you in the garden studio, he said, his smile faltering slightly. It's downstairs, near the path to the parking lot. I froze. I had booked a hillside view king for myself and Sean. I had paid the deposit. There must be a mistake, I said, reaching into my purse. Oh, no mistake, Eleanor interrupted, her hand resting heavily on the counter. I called ahead and adjusted the rooming list yesterday. Karen, you know how Sean gets with his snoring, and you've always said you sleep better when it's pitch dark and quiet. The garden rooms are very cozy, like a bunker. I thought you'd feel right at home. She smiled. It was the smile of a shark. Besides, she lowered her voice to a stage whisper. Vanessa arrived an hour ago. She's feeling a bit delicate with the condition. She needed the hillside king near the main house for medical reasons. You understand, don't you? As a woman? The audacity took my breath away. She had bumped me to the basement to give my room, the room I secured, to my husband's pregnant mistress. Sean was suddenly very interested in a piece of abstract art on the far wall. I looked at the concierge. He looked uncomfortable, sensing the tension. This was the test. If I fought now, if I made a scene in the lobby, I would look like the crazy, jealous wife. I would lose the high ground. I took the key card from the concierge's hand. The plastic felt cold. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You're right. I do prefer the quiet. It helps me focus. I took my bag. I didn't wait for Sean. I walked down the stairs, past the pool where the real family would be lounging, down a winding path that led away from the view, toward the back of the property. My room was clean, but small. The window looked directly at the bumper of a parked delivery truck. It was dark. It was isolated. It was perfect. I threw my suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. I pulled out the navy blue dress I'd chosen for tonight. It was structured, sharp, and commanded respect. I stripped off my travel clothes, washing away the smell of the limo and the humiliation of the lobby. As I dressed, I looked at myself in the mirror. They thought they had put me in the basement to hide me. They didn't realize they had just put me in a secure forward operating base. I checked my watch. 18:30 hours. Dinner at the French Laundry was in 30 minutes. The reservation was under my name. The deposit was on my card. And the surprise guest list was about to get a reality check. Hold the line, I whispered to my reflection, applying a coat of red lipstick that looked like war paint. Wait for the command. I grabbed my clutch, checked for my phone, my weapon, and opened the door. I walked up the stairs, past the laughter coming from the main maison, and headed toward the waiting car. It was time to go to dinner. It was time to find the missing chair. The glass window of the French Laundry is thick, designed to keep the noise of the outside world away from the delicate sensibilities of the diners. From where I stood in the dark parking lot, looking in, it was like watching a silent movie. I could see the fire pit glowing, I could see the crystal goblets sparkling under the string lights, and I could see my husband, Sean, laughing. He was leaning back in his chair, that silk bow tie loosened slightly, holding court with a glass of the Screaming Eagle Cabernet I had paid for. Eleanor was beaming at him, the proud matriarch. They looked relieved. They thought the problem, me, had been solved. They thought I was currently in the back of a taxi, crying my eyes out on the way to a lonely hotel room, defeated and shamed. They had no idea that I wasn't retreating. I was flanking them. I turned my back on the warm glow of the restaurant and faced the cold darkness of the valley. My thumb hovered over my phone screen. The time for emotion was over. Now, it was just execution. I tapped the first number on my speed dial. The French Laundry, Mike speaking, the voice answered on the second ring. It was low, professional, and efficient. Mike, I said, keeping my voice flat, this is Major Karen Good. There was a slight pause. Mike was the general manager, a former Marine Corps gunnery sergeant. We had bonded 3 months ago when I was planning this logistics nightmare. We spoke the same language. Major, Mike's tone shifted instantly. It went from hospitality to alert. Is everything all right? I saw you leave the table. Mike, I'm initiating code Broken Arrow. It wasn't a real restaurant code, obviously. But Mike knew what it meant. In military terms, a broken arrow calls for all available air support to target a position that is being overrun. It means, burn it down to save the perimeter. I need you to listen carefully, I said. I am pulling my personal authorization for this event, effective immediately. Understood, Mike said. I could hear him typing on a terminal. You want to cancel the dinner? Negative, I said. Let them eat. Let them drink every drop of that wine. But the deposit I put down on my Amex Platinum, refund it, right now, reverse the charge. That's highly irregular, Major. We have a policy. Mike, I cut him off. Use the discretionary override. I know you have it. And for the final bill, do not charge my card. Transfer the entire invoice to the guest of honor, Mr. Sean Caldwell. Present it to him physically at the end of the meal. Silence on the line, then a low chuckle. He ordered a 4th bottle of the Screaming Eagle, ma'am. That's going to be a very heavy piece of paper. He has expensive taste, I said. Let's see if he can afford it. Do we have an understanding? Loud and clear, Major. Semper Fi. Hooah, Mike. Out. I hung up. Target 1. Engaged. The safety net was gone. When that bill came, roughly $12,000, it was going to hit a man who had just drained his bank account to buy a ring. I didn't stop. The adrenaline was pumping now, a cold, focused high. I dialed the concierge desk at Auberge du Soleil. Front desk, this is Jessica. Jessica, this is Karen Good. I'm calling regarding the Caldwell party reservations. Yes, Mrs. Good. Is everything okay with the garden studio? Actually, plans have changed. I need to remove my credit card from the master file, immediately. Oh, Jessica sounded confused. But ma'am, that card is securing the 3 villas and the incidentals. If I remove it, Then the system will require a new method of payment upon checkout. I finished for her. Exactly. Leave the reservation active, but remove the financial guarantee. If they order room service, spa treatments, or try to leave on Sunday, they will need to present their own cards. I can do that, she stammered, but we'll need to flag the account. Flag it, I said ruthlessly. Flag it red. I ended the call. Target 2. Neutralized. They were sleeping in rooms they couldn't pay for. Now for the transportation. I opened the app for the private limousine service. I saw the reservation. Pick up at 22 Ors. Destination, Auberge Resort. I tapped Edit Trip, then I tapped Cancel. A warning popped up. Cancellation fee of $250 will apply. I didn't care. It was a small price to pay to imagine Eleanor Caldwell trying to hike 3 miles in Louboutin heels on a dirt road in the middle of the night. I pressed Confirm. The reservation vanished. Target 3, Stranded. Now came the final blow. The kill shot. I opened my American Express app. I logged in with Face ID, my dashboard loaded, showing the available credit limits. I scrolled down to the authorized users. There it was, Caldwell Construction, Sean Caldwell. This was the card I had told the hotel to use as the backup. It was the card Sean carried in his wallet to look important. It was the card tied to a business that was hemorrhaging money. I knew that card was their lifeline. If their personal cards failed, which they would rely on this one. I took a deep breath. For 5 years, I had kept that card active. I had paid the late fees. I had balanced the books. I had kept the illusion of their success alive. Not anymore, I whispered. I toggled the switch labeled Freeze Card. The app processed for a second. Then the little green toggle turned to gray. Status, locked. I stared at the screen. It was done. I had just cut the oxygen line to their financial life support. Inside the restaurant, Sean was probably raising a toast to family. He had no idea that in the span of 3 minutes, he had become destitute. He was sitting on a landmine, and the timer had just hit 0. I felt a vibration in my hand. It was an Uber notification. Your driver, Jesus, is arriving in 2 minutes. I looked back at the window one last time. Eleanor was laughing at something, her head thrown back. Enjoy it, Eleanor. Enjoy that $12,000 laugh. Because tomorrow, you're walking. I turned and walked toward the main road. I didn't look back. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the sting of the missing chair anymore. I felt lighter than I had in years. I climbed into the back of the modest Toyota Camry that pulled up. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, looked in the rearview mirror. Rough night? He asked, seeing the expression on my face. No. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached my eyes. Actually, it's a great night. I just took out the trash. As we pulled away, leaving the glowing lights of the French Laundry behind in the darkness, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated power. I know there are thousands of you listening right now who have wanted to do exactly what I just did. If you have ever dreamed of cutting off a toxic family member who used you for your money, hit that like button right now. And tell me in the comments, if you could say one thing to my husband Sean when his credit card gets declined, what would it be? Type your message to him below. We drove into the night. I was going to a motel near the airport. They were going to hell. And I couldn't wait to hear the report. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I didn't need to be. I know my husband and I know his mother. I can picture the scene with the clarity of a high-definition surveillance tape, confirmed later by Mike's detailed after-action report. Inside the French Laundry, the air was warm and smelled of brown butter and truffle shavings. The Caldwell party was finishing their 4th hour of dining. They had consumed the famous oysters and pearls, savored the A5 Japanese Wagyu beef, and, most importantly, they had drained 4 bottles of the Screaming Eagle Cabernet. Sean was leaning back in his chair, his face flushed with the kind of confidence that comes from expensive wine and the belief that you have successfully outsmarted your wife. His bow tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck like a trophy. Eleanor stood up to make a toast. She tapped her crystal goblet with a silver spoon. The table quieted down. "Family," she began, her voice slurring just slightly, but loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Tonight has been refreshing. We have shed the weight that was holding us down. We are finally focusing on the true legacy of the Caldwell name." She raised her glass high. The ruby liquid caught the light. "To the future," she declared, smiling at Vanessa's empty chair. Vanessa was still hiding in the hotel, claiming morning sickness. "To a future without barriers, to the grandson who will carry our name properly." "Here, here," Sean cheered, raising his glass. They drank, they laughed, they felt untouchable. Then, the music stopped. Mike, the general manager, walked toward the table. He didn't carry a water pitcher or a dessert menu. He carried a black leather billfold. He walked with the precision of a drill instructor inspection. He placed the folder gently on the table in front of Sean. "Mr. Caldwell," Mike said, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. "The check." Sean waved a hand dismissively. "Put it on the room, Mike. We're at the auberge." "I'm afraid I can't do that, sir," Mike replied. "The hotel has removed the authorization for room charges. We require direct payment for the dinner." Sean frowned, confused. "Removed? That's ridiculous." "Fine." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the Amex Platinum, the one I had handed him years ago. "Put it on this, and add 20% for yourself." He said it with such arrogance, the arrogance of a man spending someone else's money. Mike took the card. He pulled out the portable point-of-sale terminal from his apron. He inserted the heavy metal card. The table went silent, waiting for the receipt to sign. Beep. It wasn't a soft beep. It was a sharp, dissonant electronic rejection that cut through the low murmur of the restaurant. Mike looked at the screen. He didn't blink. "I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined." Sean laughed nervously. "Don't be silly. It's a chip error. Wipe it on your apron and run it again." Mike didn't wipe it. He simply reinserted it. Beep. "Transaction declined. Code 05. Do not honor." "It's declined, sir," Mike said, his voice volume raising just a decibel. Enough for the table of Silicon Valley executives next to them to pause their conversation. "That's impossible," Sean snapped, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. "There's no limit on that card. The issuer has flagged it as lost or stolen." Mike lied smoothly, or maybe he told the truth based on my report. "Do you have another form of payment?" "Of course I do," Sean huffed. He pulled out his wallet. He grabbed his personal Fidelity Visa. The one connected to the account I saw was empty this morning. He handed it over. His hand was shaking slightly now. Beep. Declined insufficient funds. The silence at the table was no longer expectant. It was heavy, suffocating. Eleanor put her wineglass down. Her smile was gone. "Sean," she hissed, "what is going on?" It's a banking glitch, Mom. The systems must be down." Desperate, he pulled out the corporate card. The Caldwell construction card. The lifeline. "Use this one. It's the business account." Mike took it. This was the kill shot. Beep. Declined. 3 strikes. "You're out." Mike stepped back. The professional veneer dropped, replaced by the steel of a man who runs a business. "That is 3 declined cards, Mr. Caldwell," Mike announced. The restaurant had gone quiet. People were turning in their chairs. The wealthy patrons of Napa Valley smell fear like sharks smell blood. They knew exactly what was happening. The Caldwells weren't elite, they were frauds. "The bill is $14,542, Mike stated clearly. "I need payment, now." "Call Karen," Eleanor commanded, her voice rising to a shrill panic. "Sean, call her right now. She probably messed up the accounts." Sean fumbled for his phone. He dialed my number. His fingers were slippery with sweat. I was sitting in the back of the Uber when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Hubby?" I didn't answer. I pressed the side button to silence the ringer, watching the call go to voicemail. Back in the restaurant, Sean held the phone to his ear, listening to my cheerful pre-recorded greeting. Hi, you've reached Karen. I'm currently unavailable. She's not picking up, Sean whispered, his face pale as a sheet. We need to leave, Aunt Margaret said, standing up, clutching her purse. This is embarrassing. Sit down, ma'am, Mike said. He signaled to the front of the house. Two large men, security, stepped into the doorway of the patio. No one leaves until the bill is settled, or I will call the Napa County Sheriff. Theft of services is a felony, specifically for this amount. The word sheriff hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Eleanor Caldwell, the woman who cared more about image than oxygen, looked around. She saw the judgmental stares of the socialites she desperately wanted to impress. She saw the waiters whispering. She saw her son, a broken man with no money, trembling in his chair. She realized there was no Karen to save her. There was no logistics officer to fix the mess. Fine, Eleanor choked out. She reached for her left wrist. With trembling hands, she unclasped the vintage Cartier tank watch, a gold heirloom from her late husband. Then she pulled off her sapphire cocktail ring. This watch is 18-karat gold, she said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. The ring is worth $10,000. Take it as collateral. We will wire the funds tomorrow. She slammed the jewelry onto the white tablecloth. It made a dull, heavy thud. Mike looked at the jewelry, then at Sean. We will hold this in the safe. You have 12 hours to return with cash or a certified check. If not, we sell it and call the police. He stepped aside. You may go. They didn't walk out like royalty. They scurried. Sean couldn't even look at the staff. Eleanor covered her face with her shawl. The 13 members of the real family filed out of the restaurant, passing tables of people who were openly staring and whispering. Isn't that the Caldwell family? Declined cards. How embarrassing. I heard they're broke. They walked out into the parking lot, expecting the stretch limousine to be waiting to whisk them away from the nightmare. But the driveway was empty. Just the cold wind, the dark road, and the silence of the valley. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. A single photo. It was a picture of a gold Cartier watch sitting on a bill for $14,000. Caption: Target neutralized. Dinner is served. I smiled in the darkness of my Uber. The war wasn't over, but the first battle was a decisive victory. And now they had a 3-mile walk in the dark to think about it. The exit from the French Laundry is usually a moment of triumph. You walk out sated, glowing from the wine, clutching a menu signed by the chef, ready to slide into the leather back seat of a waiting luxury sedan. For the Caldwell family, it was a walk into the abyss. They huddled together under the portico, shivering in the sharp night air of Yountville. Eleanor was clutching her bare wrist where her gold Cartier watch used to be. Sean was frantically tapping on his phone, the blue light illuminating the panic in his eyes. The valet stand was quiet. There was no stretch Hummer. There was no driver holding the door open. Where's the car? Eleanor demanded, her voice shrill. She snapped her fingers at the young valet attendant. Boy, where is our driver? We have a reservation. The valet checked his clipboard, his face impassive. The Caldwell party. That reservation was canceled remotely about 40 minutes ago, ma'am. The driver has already left the area. Canceled? Sean looked up, his thumb hovering over his Uber app. Who canceled it? The account holder, sir. Mrs. Good. Eleanor let out a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. That spiteful little. Sean, call an Uber. Get us out of this parking lot. People are staring. I'm trying, Sean yelled back, losing his composure. The service is terrible out here. He wasn't wrong. Napa Valley has strict zoning laws. Cell towers are hidden and sparse to preserve the view. But the signal wasn't the real problem. Got one, Sean cried out. Uber Black, 15 minutes away. He tapped, confirm pickup. We all know what happened next. Processing. Payment failed. Sean stared at the screen. A little red banner dropped down. Please update your payment method. His Uber account was linked to his Apple Pay, which was linked to the Amex, which was linked to the Fidelity card, which was linked to the corporate card. Dominoes. It's not working, Sean whispered. He tried to switch cards, declined. He tried to switch again, declined. For God's sake, Sean, Aunt Margaret barked. I'll order it. She pulled out her phone. She opened the app. But Aunt Margaret, despite her pearls and posturing, had been living off Sean's generosity, my salary, for years. Her card on file? It was an authorized user card on my account. Payment failed. It was a comedy of errors, a circular firing squad of financial dependents, 13 people standing in $5,000 outfits, and not one of them had a valid credit card to book a $20 ride. We can't stay here, Cousin Claire whined. My feet hurt. We'll have to walk, Sean said, his voice hollow. Walk? Eleanor looked at him as if he had suggested they eat gravel. Walk to the resort. It's 3 miles, Sean. In the dark. I am wearing vintage Chanel. We don't have a choice, Mother, Sean snapped, unless you want to sleep on the sidewalk. And so began the Great Caldwell Migration. I wish I had drone footage of it, I really do. They started walking north along Washington Street, heading toward the Silverado Trail. If you've never been to Napa at night, let me paint a picture. It is pitch black. There are no streetlights because of the dark sky ordinances. The road shoulders are narrow, made of loose dirt and gravel. And the shoes. Eleanor was wearing Christian Louboutin pumps, the ones with the famous red bottoms. They are designed for walking from a limo to a table, not for trekking 3 miles on unpaved agricultural roads. Every step was a battle. The thin stiletto heels sank into the soft earth like tent stakes. Squelch, yank, step, squelch. Ow, damn it, Eleanor cursed, stumbling as her heel caught a root. She grabbed Sean's arm for balance, nearly dragging him into a drainage ditch. My ankle! I'm going to sue her. I'm going to sue her for every penny she has. She doesn't have any money, Mom, Sean shouted back, sweating through his tuxedo shirt despite the 50-degree weather. Because we spent it all, remember? Don't you raise your voice at me. Behind them, Vanessa, who had apparently decided to sneak out of the hotel to meet them halfway, hoping to be picked up in the limo, was now standing on the side of the road, realizing no car was coming. She joined the miserable caravan. A car drove past, blinding them with high beams. They waved frantically, thumbing for a ride like hitchhikers in a horror movie. The car didn't stop. It just swerved to avoid the group of people in tuxedos stumbling through the dust. The wind picked up, howling through the vineyards. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. What was that? Aunt Margaret shrieked, clutching her pearls. Are there wolves out here? It's just a coyote, Margaret. Shut up, Sean growled. They walked for an hour. The hem of Eleanor's silver gown was now brown, caked with mud and burrs. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was being whipped across her face. Sean had taken off his bow tie and unbuttoned his collar, looking less like a CEO and more like a drunk leaving a bad wedding. His phone buzzed. He stopped. He held it up like a holy relic. 4% battery left. Is it Karen? Eleanor asked, breathless, leaning on a fence post. Did she come back? Did she realize she's gone too far? Sean looked at the screen. The light illuminated his dirty, exhausted face. It's a text, he said. Read it, Eleanor commanded. Tell her to come get us immediately, or I'm writing her out of the will. Sean swiped the screen. He read the message silently first. His shoulders slumped. The last bit of fight drained out of him. Read it, Sean. He cleared his throat. His voice cracked. Happy 70th birthday, Eleanor. He read, I got you the one thing you've never had. A lesson in independence. Enjoy the walk. Sean lowered the phone. The screen went black. The battery died. Total darkness enveloped them. She left us, Aunt Margaret whispered, horrified. She actually left us. Eleanor didn't scream. She didn't rage. She just stood there, ankle-deep in Napa dirt, in a ruined dress, realizing that her logistics officer, the woman she called the help, was the only reason she had ever traveled in comfort. My feet, Eleanor whimpered, her voice small and broken. I can't feel my feet. Keep moving, Mother, Sean said, turning away and starting to limp down the road. We still have 2 miles to go. They trudged on, a line of defeated aristocrats marching into the void. I was already in my motel room near the airport, watching Law and Order reruns and eating a vending machine candy bar. It was the best meal I had eaten in years. I checked the time. They would be getting back to the resort around 1 a.m. They would be tired, dirty, and hungry. They would go to the front desk to get their keys, and that's when they would find out about the rooms. I have to admit, imagining my mother-in-law hiking through the dirt in Louboutin is my new happy place. If you think they got what they deserved, smash that like button. And tell me in the comments, what is the petty revenge fantasy you hold for the person who wronged you? Don't be shy. We're all friends here. But the night wasn't over. The physical punishment was done. Now it was time for the legal one. I turned off the TV. I had one more folder to organize for the morning, because when the sun rose, I wasn't just leaving Sean, I was burying him. 48 hours after the Napa incident, the air in our Virginia home was stiff enough to snap a tension wire. I had spent the last 2 days methodically packing. My life, the books, the uniforms, the few personal mementos that actually mattered, fit into 4 standard-issue moving boxes. The rest of the house, the sprawling McMansion filled with overpriced furniture and Eleanor's heirloom china, felt like a museum of a life I no longer recognized. It was a stage set for a play that had finally been canceled. I was waiting in the dining room. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands clasped on top of a single, thick manila folder. I heard the front door open. "She's in here." Sean's voice drifted down the hallway. He sounded tired, hoarse. The swagger was gone. He walked in, flanking 2 other people. To his left was Eleanor, looking frail and gray, clutching her purse like a shield. To his right was Arthur Sterling, the Caldwell family attorney. Sterling was a man who wore $3,000 custom suits and smelled of breath mints and billing hours. They sat down opposite me. It felt less like a family meeting and more like a summary court-martial. "Mrs. Caldwell," Sterling began, placing his leather briefcase on the table with a heavy, authoritative thud. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. "We are here to discuss the unfortunate and aggressive events of this past weekend. My clients are prepared to file a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, theft of services regarding the canceled transportation, and tortious interference with business relations." He paused for effect, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't blink. "Furthermore," he continued, smoothing his silk tie, "Sean is prepared to file for divorce on the grounds of cruelty and abandonment. We will be seeking spousal support, given the sudden financial hardship you have maliciously inflicted upon him." I looked at Sean. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. He looked pathetic. A man who had been caught, stripped of his dignity, and was now trying to sue his way back to relevancy. "Are you finished, Mr. Sterling?" I asked. My voice was calm, the voice of an officer briefing a subordinate on a failed mission. Sterling blinked, surprised by my lack of panic. "I advise you to take this seriously, Karen. We can drag this out in court for years. We will bleed you dry in legal fees." "No," I said softly. "You won't." I slid the manila folder across the polished mahogany surface. It glided smoothly and stopped directly in front of Sterling. "What is this?" Sean asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Open it, Sean," I said. "It's a little project I've been working on. I call it Project X." Sean reached out and flipped the cover open. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. Inside wasn't divorce paperwork. It was a forensic accounting audit. It was months of bank statements, wire transfers, and verified contract discrepancies that I had compiled using my access to the home office and my background in logistics oversight. "About 6 months ago," I said, addressing the lawyer now, "I noticed some irregularities in the household budget. I started digging. I found that Caldwell Construction has been billing the Department of Defense for subcontracting work on the Norfolk base renovations." Sterling went still. He leaned over to look at the documents, his eyes scanning the highlighted columns. Specifically, I continued, reciting the facts from memory, Sean has been billing for 12 full-time employees, carpenters, electricians, site managers. The problem is, Mr. Sterling, those employees don't exist. They are ghost employees. I ran the Social Security numbers. 3 of them belong to deceased individuals in Ohio. The wages were being routed into shell accounts and then funneled back into Sean's personal slush fund. I pointed to a highlighted figure on the bottom of the spreadsheet. $2 million, I said. That is the amount of taxpayer money, federal defense budget money, that my husband has stolen over the last 3 years to fund his country club lifestyle, his mother's gambling debts, and his girlfriend's diamond ring. The room was silent. Not the silence of awkwardness, but the silence of a bomb that has just landed and hasn't exploded yet. This is... Sterling stuttered, his slick demeanor cracking. This is circumstantial. You obtained this without a warrant. I obtained it from the shared home computer, I countered, my voice hardening to steel. And it's not circumstantial. It's a federal indictment waiting to happen. It's fraud. It's embezzlement. It's a clear violation of the False Claims Act. And given the current political climate with defense contracting, the Department of Justice will eat him alive. We're talking 15 to 20 years in federal prison, Sean. Minimum. Sean looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes. Karen, you wouldn't. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I said, leaning forward. You stole from the soldiers I serve with. You stole from the country I bleed for. Do not talk to me about what I would or wouldn't do. I pulled a second document from under the folder. Here is the deal, I said. This is an uncontested divorce settlement. It states that I keep the house in Virginia, since I paid the mortgage anyway. I keep my entire pension. I keep my savings. You get the business liabilities, and you get nothing else. No alimony, no support. You leave with your clothes and your debt. I placed a pen on top of the paper. Option A, you sign this right now. You walk away. I keep the Project X file in my personal safe. As long as you leave me alone, it stays there. Option B, I looked at my watch. I drive this folder to the DCIS field office in Quantico. It's a 40-minute drive. I can be there by lunch. Eleanor let out a sob. It was a ragged, ugly sound. She wasn't crying for Sean's freedom. She was crying for the Caldwell name. Sign it, Eleanor whispered, her voice shaking. Sean, sign the paper. Mom? Sean looked at her, betrayed. If this gets out, Eleanor hissed, clutching her chest, we are ruined. The scandal, the shame. Sign it. Even in the end, it was about appearances. She would rather have a divorced, destitute son than a son in prison making headlines. Sean looked at the lawyer. Sterling closed the Project X folder and pushed it away, signaling his defeat. Mr. Caldwell, if this evidence is authentic, I cannot defend you against this. If this goes to the feds, it's over. You should sign. Sean picked up the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He looked at me one last time, searching for the woman who used to cook his meals and iron his shirts. I loved you, Karen, he whispered. No, Sean, I said, standing up. You loved the cover I provided. But the operation is over, he signed. The scratching of the pen against the paper sounded like a grand finale. I took the signed divorce papers. I took the Project X folder. The boxes in the hallway are mine, I said to the lawyer. My movers will be here in an hour. By tonight, this house belongs to me legally, but I'm putting it on the market tomorrow. I expect your keys on the counter. I walked to the front door, the heels of my boots clicking on the hardwood floor. I didn't look back at the 3 of them sitting around that expensive table. The mother who valued image over love, the husband who valued greed over loyalty, and the lawyer who realized he was outmatched. I opened the door and stepped out into the Virginia sunshine. It was bright. It was warm. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt clean. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message waiting. It was from Mike at the French Laundry. Message. Card finally cleared by his mother's jewelry. You're a legend, Major. I smiled. The war was over. I had won. But more importantly, I hadn't just defeated them. I had reclaimed myself. Now there was only one thing left to do. Start living. 1 year later. The wind on the flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford hits you differently than the wind in a vineyard. It doesn't smell of crushed grapes and damp earth. It smells of jet fuel, salt spray, and raw, unadulterated power. It screams across the Atlantic, carrying the force of 1,000 miles of open ocean. I stood near the edge of the superstructure, looking out at the gray horizon. The morning sun was just starting to break through the cloud cover, painting the steel deck in streaks of gold. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. "Good morning, Colonel," a voice shouted over the roar of a pre-flight engine test. I turned. It was Captain Miller, a young logistics officer I'd been mentoring for the past 6 months. He was holding 2 cups of coffee in a cardboard carrier, struggling to keep them steady against the wind. "Good morning, Captain," I replied. The title still felt new on my tongue, but it felt right. Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel, to be precise. I looked down at my collar. The gold oak leaf of a major was gone. In its place sat the silver oak leaf. In the military, we call it making the jump. It's a promotion that isn't given out for time served or for knowing the right people. You don't get it because your mother knew the general's mother. You get it because a selection board looked at your record, your service, and your competence, and decided you were worthy to lead. It was earned. Every ounce of silver in that insignia was paid for with late nights, deployments, and sacrifice. "Ops briefing is in 20 minutes, ma'am," Miller said, handing me a cup. "But I thought you might want to see this first. It's the Wall Street Journal, the business section." He pulled a folded newspaper from under his arm. He knew. Everyone in my unit knew. The investigation had been quiet, but the fallout was public. I took the paper. The wind tried to rip it from my hands, but I held it firm. There, on the bottom half of page B1, was the headline, "Caldwell Construction Files for Chapter 11, Liquidation Amidst Federal Fraud Probe." I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, lukewarm Navy coffee. It tasted better than any vintage Cabernet I had ever drunk. I scanned the article. It was an autopsy of a legacy. The forensic audit, my Project X, had triggered a cascade of failures. Once the government contracts were frozen, the house of cards collapsed. The article detailed the auction of the Virginia estate to pay off creditors. It mentioned the seizure of luxury vehicles and assets. But the real story was in the sidebar, the People in the News column. Sean Caldwell, former CEO, has reached a settlement with the Department of Justice, agreeing to a plea deal that includes restitution and probation. Sources say he is currently residing in a rental apartment in Richmond. And the final nail in the coffin, socialite Vanessa Hughes, previously linked to Caldwell, has reportedly moved back to Charleston. Sources close to Hughes state the engagement ended due to irreconcilable financial differences. I almost laughed. Irreconcilable financial differences. That was polite society code for the money ran out, so the mistress ran off. There was no trust fund for the heir, so there was no reason to stay. I looked at the photo accompanying the article. It was an old picture of Sean and Eleanor at some charity gala years ago. They looked so smug, so untouchable. Now Eleanor was living in a 2-bedroom assisted living facility paid for by the state. Her jewelry sold, her reputation in tatters. I folded the paper and handed it back to Miller. "Old news, Captain," I said. "Recycle it." Miller grinned. Aye, ma'am." He walked away to prepare for the briefing, leaving me alone with the ocean again. I thought I would feel a surge of triumph in this moment. I thought I would want to pump my fist and shout, "I told you so," to the waves. But I didn't. What I felt was indifference. For 5 years, I had chased their approval. I had tried to buy a seat at their table with my labor and my dignity. I had believed their lie that old money was superior to new money, that being a Caldwell was better than being a Good. I looked around the flight deck. Hundreds of sailors were moving in a choreographed ballet of dangerous work. They wore yellow, green, purple, and red jerseys. They came from Arkansas farms, Bronx apartments, and California suburbs. None of them cared who your grandfather was. They only cared if you did your job. This was the real aristocracy, the aristocracy of merit. Sean had called me the help. He was right. I am the help. I help run the most complex logistics chain on earth. I help keep freedom afloat, and I am proud of it. I touched the silver leaf on my collar one last time. The missing chair at the French laundry didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't waiting for someone to offer me a seat. I had built my own table. Over the ship's intercom, the bosun's whistle blew. All hands, flight quarters. The deck roared to life. An F-18 Super Hornet was taxiing to the catapult, its engines screaming, heat waves distorting the air behind it. It was a machine of pure purpose. I turned away from the railing. I didn't look back at the shoreline where my old life lay in ruins. I looked forward, toward the open sea, toward the mission, toward the future I had secured with my own two hands. I am Karen Good. I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and I am exactly where I belong. "Ready on the line," I shouted, my voice joining the chorus of the ship. I walked toward the island, my boots hitting the steel with a solid rhythmic thud. I was ready to work. Looking back on my journey, there is one powerful truth I want to share with you. My value was never defined by their inability to see it. The Caldwells tried to shrink me into a servant, treating my kindness as weakness. But they forgot that dignity is something you carry inside you, not something you inherit or buy with a credit card. If you are currently sitting at a table where you aren't respected, where you feel small or invisible, please listen to me. You don't need to beg for a chair. You have the power to stand up and build your own table. I want to hear from you. In the end, Karen chose to walk away with her peace of mind rather than stay and watch them burn. It was a choice of mercy over total destruction. Do you think she made the right call, or would you have sent that file to the FBI without hesitation? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Join our community, where we believe that the truth always wins.